the other thing is this can be an incredibly discouraging process. And I think everybody's going to have moments where they're incredibly discouraged. And I would have those moments and I'd have to take a little bit of a break, not necessarily like a week, but I would have to take a little bit of a break and just kind of like step away for a minute. I didn't skip my re-reviews. I always did those. But sometimes you just need to like have a breather. So just know that you're going to have those discouraging moments, but then just wallow in it, like take your breather and then jump back in.
Welcome to another episode of the CPA Exam Experience Podcast from SuperfastCPA. I'm Logan, and in today's episode, you're going to hear me talking to Nicki. Now, Nicki had an awesome story. They were traveling a lot because her husband was in the military, but eventually she got into accounting and decided to start pursuing the CPA. And when she started, she actually found SuperfastCPA right at the beginning and then realized that she also needed to have a full review course because, SuperfastCPA is supplemental. So she also purchased UWorld and Roger and started trying to study. But as you'll hear at the beginning of her story, she was trying to study for FAR and it was just super overwhelming because there was a lot going on in her life with her family and FAR was just super difficult for her. So she kind of took a break and wasn't able to do it at that time. But she came back at the end of 2023 and took BEC and all the other exams over the course of the next year and passed them all. And she did extremely well. I think she only studied somewhere around like 4, 5, or 6 months total, because even though she did it over the course of a year, she took a few breaks. So she was able to pass all of the exams over the course of about 4, 5, or 6 months. And she was able to do that while working and while having a family, and she did really well. So I think this episode is going to be a great one for anybody who wants to know, can I do this even though I'm busy, even though I have family? Can I still do this? And the answer is yes, if you have the right strategies. And you'll hear Nicki and I talking about those strategies in this episode. Now, before we dive into the episode, I just want to give you one more reminder about the Superfast CPA training webinar on superfastcpa.com. That is 1 hour that will literally save you months and months of time struggling with the exams, because we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam in just that 1 hour. So make sure you check out the 1 hour webinar. And after you watch that, make sure you also check out becoming a Superfast CPA Pro member, because Superfast CPA Pro members get access to something that I've been working on for over the past year, and it's something called multiple choice question walkthrough videos. They are on YouTube, and we also have full versions for the Superfast CPA Pro members. So if you need help with specific topics, I have created multiple choice question walkthrough videos for just about every topic in FAR, just about every topic in audit, and I've done a lot for Reg, TCP, and I'm currently working on BAR right now. So again, if you like those and you see those on YouTube, check out becoming a Pro member, because you get access to the full versions of those in the member forum. Now, with all that out of the way, let's dive into the interview with Nicki. What were you doing when you decided that you wanted to go for the CPA exam? Like, where were you in your career?
This is the second career for me. I started it after my first kids were born, kind of fell into accounting. And I am part of a military family, so we moved a lot. And on one of our moves, I decided to learn more. So I signed up for classes at the local community college. And I had a professor who essentially told me that he doesn't even look at resumes for people unless they are CPAs. It hadn't really been on my radar to do it before that. And because we move a lot, I'm always in a position to find a job. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, I will pursue this.
Right. So and you were moving a lot. Was that, are you in the military? Is your husband in the military? Like, what's, you said this is kind of a second career. Okay. Nice.
Yeah. My husband's in the military. And it's a second career just because I had been part of the mortgage industry prior to 2008 when everything crashed. And then I found myself trying to find a new path.
Okay. That makes sense. So you started going to college for accounting, and then your professor says CPA is really what you need. And that makes sense that you would want that, because if you're moving around frequently, you got to have something that will give you an in every time. So you started looking into the CPA. What was that like? Were you working in accounting yet, or were you just studying were you just doing your schooling? Like, where were you when you started to get into CPA?
I was working. Okay. So I had began working in tax, and I'm still working in tax actually. And I still don't have my CPA license, ironically enough. And that's a whole nother story. But so I was just doing school, managing work and family.
Okay.
And I think I have 3 different institutions, and I'm on my 4th now because of all the moves and just apparently I didn't pass all my exams, but I don't have enough credits as it turns out. So
Okay.
I'm still on this path.
So you've passed all the exams, but still trying to get the credits to get the license. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So what did you start doing when you started going for the CPA? Like, did you get a review course? Like, how did you start studying?
Yeah. So I believe it was 2021 when I finally received from California the okay to sit for these
Oh, okay.
exams. So then I started researching programs, and I found SuperfastCPA, and Nate made it sound so great and so easy. So I bought that right away. And then after I got that, not totally clear at the moment that I also needed a review course, then I did purchase a review course as well. And I bought UWorld
Okay.
or Roger CPA.
Yeah, whatever it is at this point. So you had Superfast CPA first, and then you got a review course, and that does happen sometimes. We never claim to be a full review course, but it does sometimes get a little bit confusing. So you got Superfast CPA, got UWorld. So you were using Superfast CPA right from the start. Is that right? Like, did you get the pro course?
I did. And so yes, I watched all the pro videos, learned how to study in this new method, and jumped right in, was super overwhelmed. And the school of thought on taking these exams, what everybody has told me is start with the hardest, start with FAR, and then once you get that one knocked out, you can knock out the rest. And so that's what I did. And then life got in the way. We moved again. I have 3 kids. But what I remember from that beginning, the beginning of my studying was that I was super overwhelmed with FAR, and it was incredibly discouraging for me. So then fast forward to it took me a year to do the exams once I finally sat down to do it. It was 2020, it's 25, so 24. At the end of 24, I took, before BEC expired, I decided, everybody told me it was the easiest one. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to jump in with the easiest exam. And so I studied for a month and passed that one.
Nice.
So there was a big gap between when I was allowed to sit for the exams and when I actually began.
Yeah.
Life got in the way.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely happens. So you started in 2021, but really didn't get to really dive in until, I think it must have been 2023, because if you were able to take BEC, that was it went away in 2024.
Oh, you're right. You're right. So I finished this in 24.
Okay.
You're right. It was 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
End of 23 to end of 2024 was your timeline. Okay.
Yes.
I see.
Correct.
So, I mean, for me, BEC was the hardest exam for me personally. I just really struggled with that one, but you passed it first try, and that was your first exam. That was the first exam you ever really took, right?
Of course, when I sat for it.
And so what was the difference this time from studying for FAR, feeling super overwhelmed, compared to studying for BEC this time? I mean, obviously, family was still probably like a big part of both situations, but what was the difference that allowed you to, sit down and pass this time?
Well, I think I worked best under a deadline, to be quite honest. And so the fact that it was expiring, I just wanted to pass it. And so I didn't think too much about the process.
Right.
I reviewed those pro videos again. And then the other thing is, I think he had put a new instructional video online, which showed using an Excel spreadsheet to take notes and use it for calculations. And that for me was an incredibly effective tool. So I worked with 2 screens, and I just kept my notes on one and used the tutor mode in the review course, and I didn't even bother with videos. I just kept going. I just was like, I'm going to trust this process. And he did say it feels weird at first, but eventually it'll click. And so that's what I did. And I listened to the BEC notes. And I just kept doing question after question after question.
Right. So what was did you just follow all parts of the process? You were studying in the morning, doing going to the questions first, were you doing all the stuff in the pro course? So
I didn't study in the morning. So I work in tax. So it's kind of a slow time of year in November for us. So I used a little bit of time at work, and then I would study after I came home and did all of the family stuff. I would study after everybody was kind of settled in for the night, and I would study at night.
Okay. And are your kids, you said you have 3 kids, are they kind of like still in school? I mean, before we got on the call, you were mentioning that, it's summer right now for you. So, is that something that kind of was the same throughout the process where, you always had to make sure that you were taking care of your kids and then you were studying in the evening or something like that? Is that kind of what it was like?
It was. I mean, it was basically my priorities were family, work, and then the exam.
Okay.
That was kind of the hierarchy for while I was going through each exam.
Yeah.
And everything else kind of fell off other than trying to remain healthy and work out and all of that. But for the most part, that was the hierarchy.
And so kind of like along those lines, you never really had this time where, you didn't have SuperfastCPA. But what did SuperfastCPA teach you or give you that allowed you to, even though you were busy with family, busy with work, and, tried to still exercise and things like that. What did it teach you or what came from that allowed you to still be able to maintain all the other things in your life?
Well, I think the elimination of all the videos and the reading, I mean, that's a lot of time. If the review courses, they'll give you a calendar. So if you map out the full course, it's just such a huge time commitment. And so by just eliminating those pieces, it was super fast.
Right. Yeah. It kind of like cuts it down. I remember when I was going through it with FAR, I counted up the hours that it would take to watch all the video. I had Becker, all the videos in Becker, and I think it was like 40 or 50 hours. And that's just watching them all one time through, not pausing or anything like that. So yeah, it saves a huge amount of time to not watch the lectures. And so did you never watch lectures at all?
No, I did watch some lectures in FAR. So if I was struggling on a certain topic, I would use the lectures. And to be honest, I didn't really watch them. I would listen to them like on a walk or whatever. So I didn't need to visually see it. I think I just needed a verbal explanation. So I did use some of them.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, to be quite honest, are boring and I don't know, incredibly, just depends on whatever the topic is.
Right. Yeah, they are, I agree. They are very boring, which is why I stopped watching them as well. And I mean, granted, it is CPA material, so can't do too much that's exciting for them. But actually you mentioned something, you would listen to them. That kind of makes me want to ask a little bit about like the mini sessions. Did you listen to the audio notes? Did you do the mini quizzes, the review notes? What did you do with all that?
So I did use the audio notes and listen to those as well while I was doing other things. Yeah. And then I used the mini quizzes as well. I didn't do probably as many as he recommends, but I did a ton of questions in my review course because I would do those re-review quizzes. I mean, without fail, that was the one thing if I was too tired to study and learn new material one day, I would just always do re-reviews all the time.
Yeah.
So I didn't use those mini quizzes quite as much. And then I didn't use the notes at all because it was like so hard for me to read it on my phone and I need I don't know. I just didn't use them.
Right. And with the, and the re-review is a huge, I mean, that's like, I think if you could really narrow this all down to like one word and, comparing this to what other people typically do compared to what SuperfastCPA teaches is like constantly reviewing, because otherwise you're just going to forget everything. Did you find that was kind of like the key in your success, was the constantly reviewing?
Without a doubt. I think that was the winning ticket for me.
Right. So you took BEC, you passed that in just a month. And what did the rest of it look like? What was your timeline after that?
So then, we jump into tax season right away, January, February. So I didn't even bother during my busy periods. And then the next opportunity, I felt that I had free time to study. My whole family left for the month of July. So I began in July and studied. I did reg in July and took it on July 31st. So I started in July, finished in July 31st and passed that one. And then I took the last two after extension. So audit and FAR I took after October 15th and got those done in the last couple months of the year.
Wow. So really, if you really think about the time that you were studying, you really did all of these in 4 months.
4 months, maybe a little more, but yes.
That's incredible. So, a year timeline, but really it was just a month for BC, month for reg, and then about 2.5 months for audit and FAR. That's really impressive. Mm-hmm. And you passed all of them first try. Is that right?
I passed all of them. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Now, I'm not saying I was like stellar. I think I got a 75 on FAR, but I thought, well, I studied just the right amount.
Hey, that's the perfect score. It does not matter. I got a 75 on BEC. I was mentioning to you that I thought that was the hardest one. So, hey, it doesn't matter. That's awesome. That's really impressive. So what did your typical day look like then? So, were you studying like 2 hours, 3 hours? So during those 4 months that you were actually studying, how much would you say you were actually studying each day?
So I would probably say I got about 2 hours of studying in per day during the week. Mm-hmm. And then I had an incredibly supportive husband who would kind of take on whatever he could on the weekends. And so I would study most of the weekends. Okay. I would go into the office and just study for 6-8 hours a day if I could. Mm-hmm. On the weekends.
And during those weekends, were you studying mainly multiple choice questions still, or did you start incorporating sims at that point?
Okay, so I don't necessarily recommend this, but I did kind of feel like the multiple choices really did cover everything that was on the sims. So I didn't do a lot of sim preparation. I did jump into some sims for FAR.
Right.
But I think that I found the sims to be incredibly discouraging. And so I didn't spend a ton of time on sims. I just assumed that I covered the material with the multiple choice and then hoped for the best. I got into the test.
Yeah, and you passed all of them. Sims are such a difficult thing to prepare for because they're going to be different on the exam than what you've seen. And I recently made some walkthrough videos for sims for each section for some clients. And the thing that I think that most people need to realize about sims is there's like diminishing returns when it comes to studying sims. You can't study 6 to 8 hours of studying multiple choice questions. It's very difficult to study 6 to 8 hours of sims. So really practicing sims is less about a ridiculous amount of time spent on them and more about having that exposure and learning how to pick a sim apart. Because most of your knowledge comes from multiple choice questions, like you said. So you said you practiced sims with FAR. Did you, what was your approach with sims? Did you just not really study them? Or, did you just kind of...
Well, it gives you on your study plan that the review course gives you, they just have sims to knock off and hit a check mark. And so I didn't always do them, but I would maybe tackle 4 or 5, maybe 3. I think they came in test sets of 3, and I would sit down and I would just do 3, and it felt like I always failed them.
Yeah.
And then I would sit and I would look at all the explanations and read through why I failed them. And so maybe once a week I might do a few for FAR. I don't feel like I did any for BEC. Maybe I did a couple. I don't know. And reg, I work in tax, so I was less concerned about reg. And then audit was just a bear for me. And the simulation, I didn't like them. It was just so much reading and words. And
audit is such a unique exam. It's just completely different than the other ones. Totally conceptual. Every little thing is so similar to every other little thing, but there's these slight differences. So yeah, I think audit is I would say that audit is maybe more difficult than FAR for a lot of people just because it's completely different. So yeah,
I feel like it was for me.
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back to the order of the exams because what ended up working for me was different than what everybody recommended, which is take FAR first. FAR was my very last one I took. And I did feel that a lot of the knowledge that I had learned through all of the previous exams aided my understanding in FAR. So I felt like FAR was a lot less overwhelming for me having taken it last than first. So for anybody who is in that boat, the order may be different for you.
And the interesting about FAR is it's so connected to the other exams that it can kind of go either way. You can either take it first, and if you pass FAR, your knowledge can kind of translate to the other exams. Or like you were saying, since FAR can be so difficult, getting that confidence and getting that understanding from the other exams made FAR not as intimidating. I didn't do FAR first. I think I did audit first. So yeah, the exam order doesn't really matter. Other than, maybe trying to do whatever would be slightly maybe most difficult for you. It honestly, as long as you pass all of them, doesn't really matter. Yeah. So actually, I kind of already asked this, but I just wanted to ask it maybe more clearly. What was the difference between studying in 2021, you were overwhelmed, to studying in 2023? Like, you had super fast CPA both times, but what was the difference? Why were you so overwhelmed then compared to in 2023?
Well, I think I was trying to study for FAR.
That makes a difference, yes.
Yeah, the material was incredibly overwhelming, and I don't think I really trusted the process yet. I felt like, oh, I need to look at the materials, I need to look at the videos, and I still kind of was messing around with that. But then when I decided to take in 23, there was that hard and fast deadline that this exam is going to be gone, and then I'm going to have to buy, well, actually my material is updated, but I was just thinking, oh, I'm going to have to like switch focuses. And anyway, so just that hard and fast deadline, it was like forcing me to get started. And because I only had about a month, I dove into the super fast method wholeheartedly and didn't question it, and just kept putting one foot in front of the other and kept going until I was done.
Right. And how long would you say it? I mean, you had a month for BEC, and you mentioned that, of course, Nate says it'll take some time to get used to it for it to click. Would you say it started clicking before you took BEC, or did you not really feel like it clicked until you saw your result for BEC?
Oh, no, I felt like once probably 2 weeks of studying that way, it started to click. And I understood how I was learning through the questions. And so certainly the method, I felt like it clicked for me about 2 weeks into my studying, and I just kept going at that point.
Okay.
So even though those first 2 weeks feel awkward and like, this isn't working, I just kept going.
Right. And I think that's a good tip for a lot of people is, I think frequently, and this is how most people are in a lot of things in life, we kind of get discouraged if things aren't working quickly. But yeah, just kind of letting yourself stay in it for like those 2 or 3, maybe even 4 weeks until it clicks, I think is kind of that sweet spot where things start to actually work out. So, it started to click after about 2 weeks. What did your studying look like? So you get into doing the multiple choice questions and you are learning from them. What would you do when you were learning from them? And especially when you were learning from something difficult, like what was your process like?
Oh, so I would take notes on the Excel sheets with the more difficult topics, I think, to kind of help me remember it. That was important for me. I love to do, I faster with typing, so that's where I use the computer, but I do think I learned better probably handwriting, but I didn't have time for that. So I would take notes on all of the questions that I didn't grasp. And then I would rework the formulas that I got wrong. And I felt like I got everything wrong. Like anything you started a new topic, it was just failing all over the place, And so I just kept redoing the problems and reworking, and then I'd re-review. And so I guess, and those multiple choice, they give you so much information.
Especially UWorld.
And if you take the time to read them and really try and understand what you're reading, then that gets you further along than just kind of skimming it. So I did try to put the time in on the new material. Now, when I was doing my re-review tests, I would do the non-tutoring tests, and then I would go through the questions I got wrong. I didn't spend as much time focusing on the notes and the tutoring notes in those questions. I would just try to say, where did I misstep and what did I misunderstand, and kind of maybe make a note for that.
So you, and you were, I agree. I typically did better with handwritten notes, but definitely the like getting used to using an Excel sheet, I think is a really important skill because you have an Excel sheet on exam day. So that's a very
Mhm.
useful thing to
It
be.
saved you
Yeah.
so much time.
Yes. Yep. Because you're used to it. You've been doing that for the whole time you've been studying, so it makes it easier. Uh, did you ever really go back and look at those notes, or was it more of a in the moment thing to help it kind of click?
Mostly in the moment, I would tell myself that I was going to read them every night, before bed for like 10 minutes. But by the time I was done studying, I was tired and I'm like,
Mhm.
forget it.
Yeah.
So the week before the exam, I would start kind of reading through them. I would refer back to them when I was confused about something and find where my note was
Mhm.
on whatever the topic is. And then I would print them out for that last week and just kind of like, if I had time, I'd read through my notes. I was reading through them in the car in the parking lot before going for the exam. So that's kind of how I use the notes.
Right. And it sounds like that was kind of your version of flashcards, because we tell people to make flashcards, but did you not really make flashcards and more just focused on those notes?
I tried to, but again, it was more of a time
Right.
crunch. I didn't, and I really do think that with the testing that I was doing daily to go over all of the material that I had learned, it was keeping that fresh in my mind
Mhm.
just on a daily basis. So the flashcards I didn't use. Sometimes I would go in to the ready decks in
Mhm.
my class and use those, but pretty infrequently.
Okay. And kind of switching gears right here. So you also mentioned earlier that you listened to the audio notes. Did you listen to those a lot? Was that like just any time you possibly could? What did what did you feel was helpful about the audio notes?
Well, I would walk. I go out walk with my dog every morning, so that for me was my audio note
Hmm.
time, and
Right.
so I would just plug in, and it would be. I would say I just got to get through this exam, and then I can listen to something more interesting when I'm
Yeah.
done.
Yep.
So that is pretty much how I use the audio notes,
Right.
mostly during that time of day. I would try and do it later, but I mean, you have 3 kids, like you're just constantly interrupted, and
Yeah.
just it. So.
Yes. Yes. Uh, yes. And kind of along the lines with your family, like, were you still able to, like, I mean, you said that family and then work were your top priorities, and then the CPA. Were you able to still, be there with your kids, take them to school, do activities with them? What were you still able to do all that stuff?
I did a lot less,
Right.
especially on the weekends. My husband kind of stepped up and did all the driving to the different events and such. We did have dinner every night as a family, so we maintained that. I did have to do, drop off and pickups, so I did that, but I didn't do a lot of the extra things.
Right. Just for but that was even just
But
during
it
those
was
4
4
months.
months,
Yeah.
so
That's not that
yeah,
bad, really.
right.
Honestly, if people could pass the CPA exam in 4 months just by sacrificing a little bit of time, I think everybody would 100% go for that. Uh, but it seems like you didn't really have to sacrifice, like, too much, like, would you say that's true? Like, you're obviously very busy, but you were still able to see your kids, still able to do the important things. Would you say you didn't have to sacrifice too much?
Yeah, I mean, what are you sacrificing? Some TV time and maybe some social outings. A lot of my friends who were used to seeing me, are like, you disappeared.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, just with anything, like if you had, just like with tax season, I don't see people
Mhm.
because I'm
Right.
working all the time and it's all kind of the same.
Yeah,
So
right. Uh, so overall with everything, what would you say were and we maybe have already mentioned this a little bit, but I just kind of want to hear it one more time. What would you say were the most helpful things that Superfast CPA taught you or helped or gave you in going through these exams?
most helpful was the study plan and the method and learning from the questions
Yeah.
without a doubt. And then I think the re-review, again, I mentioned this, that was key. It kept it fresh in my mind. I didn't forget it. And the other thing I'll come back to that, but so those 2 things, and then the listening for
Hmm.
me, just even though it wasn't all the
Yeah.
time, but it just was another way to learn it, other than looking at the computer screen and doing questions, just found another way into my brain. So I would say those 3 were key for me. The other thing that I want to mention for me, I felt like one of the reasons I wanted to do the exams quickly was because, the longer like if I take 3 months to study it, it's not as fresh in my brain no matter what. Even with all that re-review, it's going to fall off. And so the quicker I did it, I knew that it still might be there. So that was the other reason that I wanted to do it quickly. So I do think that is a benefit of trying to really push through and just getting it done.
Right. Like having that, just obviously not rushing through it, but just being very committed to doing it all the time. Like just that is like a huge priority for you in the moment. I really agree with that. I think I did all of mine in 6 weeks, besides my first one. So I felt the same way, that getting through it quickly really kept like the momentum going, really kept my motivation up, and kept things really fresh, as like you were saying. And going back to the audio notes, I also loved the audio notes because it made it so that I felt like I really was studying like all throughout the day. And it just, and they can be boring. I mean, we all know that it can be boring to listen to Nate. And I think you probably listened to my voice as well once you were doing audit, which
I did.
is still weird.
It was all new material.
Yep. Which is still weird that people are listening to my voice out there. But I think that the audio notes are just like, I think frequently that becomes people's like bread and butter, that's just like the thing that they're always able to do. And would you say that, you were learning from it even if you weren't fully listening all the time? Is that right? Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he mentioned at the beginning of the notes about how to use them and just to keep going, even though you may have missed some of it, because you do end up listening to them all again because you're listening to them. So yes, I mean, there were certainly moments when I zoned out, and then I'd kind of like get back in line with what was happening, and then it would come back around and I'd hear it. So I tried not to worry about it. I didn't really rewind. I just kept it going.
Yeah. I think that's perfect right there. I mean, honestly, I feel like we've pretty much hit most of the stuff. I mean, we talked about your main studying, we talked about Sims a little bit, we talked about your notes, and then also about the mini sessions. Is there any other thing in the process that you thought of that was really helpful, or that you wanted to talk about on the podcast that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I think 2 things I'll mention. The first one is, for me and for any of you out there who need to have a hard deadline to motivate you, I did schedule my exams. So I looked at my calendar and I figured it out, like this is how much time I had to study for it, and I paid for it and I put it and I scheduled it, because I didn't want to have that like wishy-washy, I can always extend. So that was a really helpful tip for me because I need that kind of hard and fast deadline.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, with the review programs, they score your tests as you go. And because you're learning from the questions, it is a bit discouraging to look at your scores because you feel like you're learning, but then remember that as you go through new material and you're failing all those questions and you're missing them, that factors into your score. So there's a lot of advice out there that says, oh, you need to be at 80% passing on all of these questions. I don't think, if you're using the super fast method, at those scores exactly correlate to what you're at, whether you're ready or not. So don't let those scores hold you back. Because I think on all of my scoring, I was at about a 70% when I sat for each exam, and I still passed. So if you need that marker to get there for yourself, like, by all means go for it. But because you're not hitting those questions that you're learning from correct, that's always going to factor in. And then the other thing is, this can be an incredibly discouraging process. And so I think everybody's going to have moments where they're incredibly discouraged. And I would have those moments, and I would, I'd have to take a little bit of a break. Not necessarily like a week, but I would have to take a little bit of a break and just kind of like step away for a minute. I didn't skip my re-reviews. I always did those, but sometimes you just need to like have a breather.
Right.
So just know that you're going to have those discouraging moments, but then don't just wallow in it. Like, take your breather and then jump back in.
Right. I think that, in the coaching program where we have like coaching clients that we work with a little bit more closely, that is definitely a frequent discouragement, is they're doing the questions first, they're doing all this, but they don't feel like they're improving. And, this is a hard process and they get really discouraged. So I really like what you said there. And actually, I have two more questions based on what you were saying. So, um, how did you, this sometimes seems like a silly question, but how did you stay motivated? Like, what kept you going through, I mean, what kept you motivated during this?
Well, I will tell you, my husband was a huge help because he would just say, "Come on, keep going, don't stop." And sometimes you need to hear that from an outside person. And then I think just like I'm older, so I have been through so many different things in life that are difficult, and you just kind of learn over time that if you just keep going, you'll eventually get there.
Yeah.
And if you just stop, then that will be your result. And so, part of life experience has just taught me that you just have to keep pressing on.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. That's the interesting thing about the CPA exam. And it's not always like this in all things in life, but the only way you can truly fail the CPA exam is if you stop, you just give up. And just curious, did you have the motivation sheet? Like there's the one in the pro course where we ask you to fill it out. Did you ever fill that out and print that out?
I think I probably did the very first
at the beginning
time I started, and I don't think I did it again.
Okay, all right. But but that's something that I always like to recommend to people is we have that motivation sheet in the pro course where we have you just write it out, why am I doing this? What are the bad things that will happen if I don't do this? And I just think having that constant motivation, like seeing that, like, why am I doing this is super important. And also having that support from other people. I think frequently people think that, candidates think that they have to do this totally alone, which is kind of true because a lot of people don't really understand the CPA, but being open with people in your life and saying, "Hey, I really need to get this done. Can you help me, can you help me with this? Or, can you be okay with not seeing me as frequently?" I think that, being open with people about it, like you were with your husband, can get will give people a lot of support that they didn't think they could have. And one other question, you were talking about the, feeling discouraged about the questions and everything. At what point did you kind of have a mindset shift where it's okay to not do very well on the questions when I'm learning from them? Because a lot of people get really discouraged by their scores when they're learning from the multiple choice questions. So what helped you to like get past that?
I think I hate to say it was all the way into my audit studying because audit was the hardest for me and I just kept missing them. But I had already scheduled my test.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I've passed 2 and, I'm 50% of the way there. So I think it was in that class in that course where I realized like, okay, my scores are just not going to accurately reflect what I know. But even still, I knew that kind of, I never really hit 80% on any of my studying, but I think because audit, I was just failing. Like I kept failing questions and failing review tests. And it was just, that was the hardest one and the most miserable for me to study for. So that one is probably where I realized like, I just have to keep going and hope for the best.
So what helped you to know or to feel like you were still learning from the questions? Like, what allowed you to still go sit for the exam thinking that you would hopefully pass, even though you were kind of feeling like that?
I do think, because I definitely thought about extending my test date on audit. And I think my husband was like, don't extend it, just go take it. And because, the worst that happens is you don't pass, right? So it's like, at least you kind of know what you're walking into then at that point. You do start to learn it. I mean, even though you feel like you're failing a lot and you might miss the same question, and so it's, something's not clicking, but you do start to see yourself learning the material. You're like, oh, I remember this. Oh yeah, that's how that works. Right. You kind of do see yourself learning, even though, it might be hard and it might take a while to get there.
Yeah. Even though you might be looking at your scores and saying, wow, I got like a 50% on my quiz today. But if you can look back over the course of your, your month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks and feel like, oh, I really have learned this a lot more than I realized, I think that can be something that's very motivating, especially when you're doing questions first. That was kind of like my last I think that was my last question based on what you had just said there. Now, the last question that we always like to ask, even though these are probably things we've talked about throughout the interview, but just kind of to finish, what would be your top 2 or 3 tips to people who are still going through the CPA exam? What would be your top 2 or 3 tips to them?
My number one tip is to do the review every day. Just make that your benchmark. You're going to do at least 30 questions a day. And my second tip is I do think the speed of which you go about it matters. And if you can just really dig deep and focus for months to 6 weeks and then take the exam, I just think it's going to be easy for you because it won't be so much time from when you covered the beginning of the material. And lastly, I do think your support network matters. So get your family on board.
I love that. Yep. I think that's a super important point right there. You did amazing. I'm so glad that I was able to be on this call with you today, Nicki. Congrats on being done. I hope that everything works out with getting your license soon. Like, what's the, like, how much more do you have to go for the like credits and stuff like that?
Oh, I guess I needed some more accounting and business credits. So I have to take I think I have to take 6 classes. So I'm just doing, I've signed up for 2 and I'll knock them out.
Yeah, just
be done. And by the time I'm done, they'll pass the new law where it's 2 years of experience and 120 credits.
Oh, no. So, yeah, I hope that goes smoothly for you. But I mean, you got by far the hardest part out of the way, which was doing the exam. So
definitely.
Good job with that. Again, congrats on being done. And thanks for being on the call today.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, that was the interview with Nicki. And again, I thought it was an awesome interview because she was able to go from being super overwhelmed, trying to study for FAR the first time, to having that shift and things changed a little bit in her life. And she was able to go pass all 4 exams over the course of a year. And she did exceptionally well. And as you heard her mentioning there at the end, a lot of that had to do with the key strategies that SuperfastCPA teaches. Mainly, she really talked about the re-review. Reviewing what you've studied every single day is a key thing that you need to be doing to be able to pass the CPA exams. And I thought that was awesome that she talked about that so much. So I'm sure you loved this episode with Nicki, and I'm glad that you listened to it. Now, before you go, again, remember, make sure to check out the SuperfastCPA training webinar on SuperfastCPA.com. And after that, make sure you check out becoming a SuperfastCPA Pro member because they get access to multiple choice question walkthrough videos, the full versions that we post in the member forum, because there are smaller versions in YouTube, but if you want the full versions, you can become a SuperfastCPA Pro member. Now, as we wrap up, if you liked the episode, make sure to like it and leave a comment in the YouTube video or leave a rating in your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you in the next episode.